Chapter 291. Sweet as Raspberry 2. For the next 2 days, we didn't stop at all. Not for rest, not even for food. There was no safe place to set up a camp. And in pitch-black darkness, we couldn't even light a fire without drawing unwanted attention. We still paused from time to time to drink water or eat snacks, but, like I said, no proper food. Every break was cut short within minutes. So aside from Michael and me, everyone was running on fumes now. Meaning they were beyond lethargic, extremely hungry, and just barely hanging on. But the one in the worst condition was Lily. Since that girl had been using her origin card non-stop to guide us, her essence was utterly depleted, and her head was killing her. In her own words, the migraine was so intense it felt like her skull was being split open. So Michael copied her power and took her place instead. Which meant I had to take his place on the front lines. And I hated all the extra work. To help me see better during fights, he gave me a heat vision card, which did help, somewhat. And by somewhat, I mean I could now see the blurry, glowing shapes of creatures that wanted to murder me a few seconds before they tried instead of one. Amazing upgrade. Truly life-changing. Still, it was better than nothing. Being able to see the glowing silhouettes slithering, crawling, or sprinting through the darkness toward us at least gave me a fighting chance every time we were ambushed. Not a good one, but a chance nonetheless. But stepping into Michael's role was way too much for someone like me who wasn't suicidal and loved his life dearly. Now, I know you must be thinking I was overreacting a bit here. I mean, I was fighting before, right? So what was the big deal about doing the same thing on the front lines? It was a big deal. I wasn't a frontline fighter. While I was comfortable being a brawler, my preferred role was either support or midline like a sentry or caster. A frontline fighter has to take the brunt of the damage during attacks, and they're usually the first to die among the brawler class. I didn't want to be the first to die. I had these fools for that. Regardless, I played the part. We were attacked multiple times during those 2 days, and I fought valiantly without using anyone as my meat shield. Yeah, I know, like I always say, miracles do happen. By the end of it, however, I had grown a little paranoid of the darkness. Every shadow felt like a beast lunging. Every faint sound felt like a claw inches from my face. So every time something snarled or moved too fast in the corner of my vision, I'd instantly throw my axe at it. One time I almost took Vince's head off by mistake. He never sneaked up on me after that for the entirety of our journey. Meanwhile, Michael, now behind me, was calmly predicting attacks just like Lily was doing earlier. Left, duck, don't go there, idiot, I told you not to go there. That's not a tree, that's a thing with teeth. Move, I swear at one point he said, right, and when I stepped right, he muttered, not that right. I nearly took his head off too. This time, not by mistake. By the start of the 3rd day, Lily had recovered a lot. So she took her position back, and Michael took his. I didn't complain. My last fight had been a horrible one, and I had a shallow, claw-shaped gash on my chest. My shirt was shredded and even my robe was slightly damaged. Luckily, its spatial pocket was still working fine. Since my injury was nothing serious, we didn't slow down our pace. After all, we desperately wanted to get out of this dark region as fast as possible. Why? Well, aside from everyone else being hungry and sleepy, we still felt that presence behind us. Something was still watching us. And whatever it was, that thing had been following us since our first day here. So we wanted to get into the light as soon as we could in case we finally needed to fight it. A few hours passed, and we kept pushing through the dark like exhausted ghosts. Michael was still fine, and so was I, but everyone else's steps had started to drag. Their breaths were also a lot shallower. The damp earth stuck to our boots, and the towering trees loomed overhead like a cage of black ribs. No beast had attacked us for a while now. It meant we were either close to getting out of here or nearing the caldera. Or it meant something was about to go wrong. I hoped it was the first option. No, I prayed it was the first option. And you know things are serious when an atheist starts to pray. As the adrenaline wore down, my frontal ribs started to throb with every stride. The shallow gash on my chest wasn't life-threatening, but it stung like hell, and the constant friction from walking didn't help. Still, I kept going. The silence around us broke only with our footsteps and Lily's weak, strained directions. Left, step, careful. Gods, she sounded like she was hanging by a thread. Michael stayed close behind her, ready to catch her if she collapsed. Ray and Alexia were guarding the right flank, whisper arguing about whether the sound behind us was breathing or just rustling branches. Vince and Kong were on the left. And due to my earlier contributions, I had decided to reward myself by taking the position at the very rear. But I was so focused on scanning the dark that when fingers suddenly hooked the back of my collar and yanked me, my heart nearly shot out of my throat. What the? I started, but stopped as soon as I turned and saw who it was. Wait, Julie, wah. My half-formed question died in my mouth as her cold hand pressed firmly against my chest, applying a jelly-like liquid to my open wound. A soothing coolness seeped into the torn flesh of my gash as I realized it was a healing potion. I blinked and looked down at her hand, then at her face. Her brows were faintly knitted as she concentrated, mouth slightly open, a few strands of her short silver hair falling over her glacial blue eyes. She brushed them away impatiently, while her fingers moved in small circles, spreading the potion evenly, almost delicately. I froze. Because Juliana Vox Blade, my personal headache and the coldest menace I'd ever met, was tending my wound. Ah, hell, she was planning to kill me, wasn't she? Now, I know it may sound insane. Because why would she bother to mend my wound if she wanted to kill me, right? And I admit, I didn't know the answer. But I could only assume it was part of some convoluted, long-term scheme. It won't fully heal with this, she murmured without looking up, her soft voice breaking me out of my thoughts. I didn't have a lot of potion left, but it should be enough to close the gash so it won't get infected. We don't know what kind of parasites or rot this place has, so it's best not to keep the wound open. It completely slipped my mind, I should have done this earlier. I was completely thrown off guard. Her tone was full of concern. Genuine concern. I didn't know how long it had been since I heard that from her. When we were kids, maybe. I stared at her as her hand ghosted over my torn skin. She was a couple of inches shorter than me, and her face was so close that I could see her fine lashes, notice the faint crease between her brows, and feel her breath warm against my chest. When she finally looked up, our gazes locked. And I almost forgot what I was going to say. Her eyes widened a fraction, looking puzzled at my lack of response. What? Thanks, I managed, quietly. Her expression shifted, and then she smiled. It wasn't a very wide, bright, or warm smile. It was small. In fact, it was barely there, but it was undeniably real, unlike her usual cold and practiced ones. Sure, it's the least I could do, she replied. You've saved me, like, twice already. I blinked again, then smirked. Actually, it's thrice. Remember, you were screaming the third time. Her smile twitched. I have no idea what you're talking about, young master. I tittered as she slipped the now empty vial back into her pocket and took out something else, a card. She held it toward me. I frowned, confused. What's this? Night vision, she said. Got it after the last fight. Oh, right. The last fight, when I was still handling the front lines, was against some shadowy monstrosities. A whole horde of them. On a few of the weaker ones, Juliana, Alexia, and Ray had landed the killing blows. They saved me a couple of times, or that is what they claim. I, on the other hand, claim they stole my kills. You're giving it to me? I asked, incredulous. You'll be fine without it. She pointed casually to one of the cards circling behind her shoulder, floating with the rest of her summoned arsenal. It bore the same rune as the one she was handing out to me. Alexia got a similar one, she said. But since she can't see without her aura sense, she gave it to me. That works, I shrugged, appreciatively taking and equipping the card. It dissolved into my soul arsenal instantly, replacing Fire Arrow. Then I summoned it the very next second, and my vision shifted as soon as I did. I could see again. The branches, the vines, the distant stone outcroppings, everything that was previously shrouded by the dark shadows, I could see now. It was far, far better than Michael's useless heat vision. But before I could even properly enjoy my sight again, Juliana cleared her throat. But it's not free. Oh, of course it wasn't. I turned to her, narrowing my eyes. What do you want? She held out her hand. Something to drink. My throat is parched. Well, I guess that was fair. But it was still a very underhanded way to go about it. She could have just asked me. I scoffed under my breath, reached into my robe's dimensional pocket, and fished out an energy drink can. She took it, cracked it open, and downed half of it in 2 gulps. Wow, she must have really been thirsty. But then, she stopped. Arg, it's sweet, her face crunched in something akin to disgust. Sweet as raspberry. I paused and tilted my head slowly. But then I recalled something, and let out a sudden chuckle. Oh yeah, you don't like sweets. She glared at the bottle like it had personally offended her. I added quickly, but wait, you used to like raspberries, didn't you? When we were kids, I used to bring you raspberry pastries all the time. And Juliana went completely rigid, not just her expression, but her entire body as well. It was only for a heartbeat, but I felt it. I saw it. I saw her grip on the bottle slacken. The stillness that followed felt wrong, like I had said something I shouldn't have. Quote. You remember that? She whispered. The way she said those words threw me off. Her voice wasn't cold, nor was it indifferent. If it was anything, then it was shocked. And tinged with something that could have been fragile. Like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to ask that question. Or supposed to. But what kind of question even was that? Of course I remember, I said, my frown deepening. How could I not? Those were some of the happiest days before my awakening. She kept staring at me for a moment so long that I started feeling oddly self-conscious. Her eyes kept shifting between so many different emotions so fast that I couldn't pin any of them down. Then her lips parted slightly, and she asked almost inaudibly, so why did you act as if you didn't remember those times, when you tormented me so cruelly like I was a stranger? Thud, my heart nearly stopped, and so did everything else in the world. The darkness, the cold, and the distant rustle of something following us. All of it faded. My breath hitched like I was gut-punched. Like the air had been forced out of my lungs. This was the first time she had ever spoken about that incident. The first time she had even acknowledged that crack between us. The first time she had asked, so openly and painfully, why I had hurt her. And I didn't know how to answer her. Julie, the words tangled on my tongue, tripping over feelings so heavy I didn't want to name or acknowledge. I didn't know how to explain. Because what was there to explain? Should I say that I grew bitter and angry by the way my father was treating me back then? Or that I had developed so much inferiority complex that I pushed away the best person I had in my life? How could I explain any of it? Excuses so pathetic that I felt enraged just at the thought of voicing them. Still, I was going to try. I don't know what I was going to say exactly, but I was going to try. Hey, you two, come on. We both flinched. Vince's voice rang from ahead, bright and annoyingly loud in the deafening quiet. He jogged back toward us, waving his arms dramatically. We found the way out of here. Juliana dropped her gaze instantly. Her usual indifferent expression slammed back into place. And just like that, the moment slipped through my fingers. As she stepped past me, quietly following the others, I felt a hollow ache spread through my chest even though the wound had closed. Chapter 292, Kevin. The very moment we stepped out of the shadowed region, I almost cried happy tears. Almost. Light touched my face for the first time in days. Okay, well, light was a generous word. More like less darkness. The sky above still wasn't whole. It was still broken, shattered pieces of reality suspended in the troposphere, reflecting the bleeding moonlight like shards of glass. And the moon itself continued to spill its crimson glow like a waterfall of blood cascading down somewhere on the distant horizon. But hey, at least the trees were thinner here. At least we could move without worrying about something in the shadows lunging at us. And, as Michael's clone had told us, there were far fewer monsters the closer we got to the caldera. It took exactly 5 minutes for us to understand why. Because the moment we neared the next escarpment, another enormous step down the endless terraces of this cursed jungle, we all collectively felt a suffocating pressure descend upon us. It wasn't anything physical or magical or supernatural. No, it was instinctual. An instinctive, primal sense of dread crawled down our spines and settled deep into our hearts, setting every nerve ending in our bodies on edge. My feet faltered against my will, and I felt my pulse stutter. We didn't have to guess where this overwhelming feeling was coming from, the caldera. Miles ahead of us, atop the tall mountain where the Moon Eater was sealed, a terror so oppressive radiated in waves that it felt almost tangible. It felt like we were walking through a violent river current, helplessly trying to push back against the gushing flow that was hell-bent on drowning us. Now, I could lie and say I wasn't scared. That I was brave when even the most courageous heroes like Michael and Alexia were hesitating to continue the journey on this route. But that would be a lie. In truth, when I felt that horrifying sense of foreboding seep into my bones, when my lungs tightened and my vision tunneled involuntarily for the briefest second. The thought of tucking my tail and running in the opposite direction did cross my mind, just like everyone else in the party. That fear was simply too strong for us to bear. And we were humans. Humans, who could rationalize our feelings and override instincts with logic. But most spirit beasts, on the other hand, practically ran on instinct without a shred of intelligence. No wonder they wouldn't dare step anywhere near this place. Which was, I supposed, why the path forward had been wiped clean of predators. Great, at least the rest of our journey would be easy, until it was time to meet a creature that could wipe us out with a snap. We climbed down the escarpment and trudged through several more miles of jungle over the next 2, maybe 3 days. Time had blurred for all of us. Even Ray, who was vlogging daily, had forgotten what day it was. Some claimed it was 18th. I claimed it was 20th. Who could say who was right? I was always right. Anyhow, we continued forward. Everything slowly blended into one long march punctuated by sudden waves of terror washing over us like cold tides. We made a couple of stops to rest properly in between, so everyone was caught up on sleep. Everyone but me. I was still not comfortable sleeping. But since there were no beasts around, we still hadn't had a proper meal, meaning everyone was still way too hungry by this point. Way too hungry. Ray once tried to chew on Vince. We had to pry him off. So, yeah, they were, all commit cannibalism. Level hungry. And yet, strangely, this was the happiest I had ever seen them all. Really, they couldn't stop giggling, cheering, and making unfunny jokes. Even I couldn't help but join them sometimes. Lily had recovered enough to hum little tunes while walking. Vince and Kong were chatting, happily, and Kong was actually smiling, genuinely. I nearly tripped at that sight. I had never seen that Kringlord crack a smile. At one point, Michael and I were mid-argument about something I can't bother to remember, and Ray just started singing a song like this was a musical. Oh tilde h, my. The sun's gone hidden, and the clouds are full of drama again. He clapped. Oh tilde h gosh, my boot just slipped off the pavin, and Mikey's yellin' at Sammy in pain. And it worked. I don't know how, but it worked. Lily joined in, her voice still a bit strained but no less pleasant. Ho tilde lee moly, it's a messy mornin', and I'm just trying to keep my hat on straight. Oh tilde h, boy, they're startin' right after the snorin', but it's nothin' a tune can't abate. Even Juliana, yes, I kid you not, even Juliana Vox Blade, began singing softly under her breath. And her voice was absolutely, unfairly beautiful. So sing when the mood gets silly. Hum a little tune till the fumes start to dissipate, she snapped in rhythm. Hug a foe, or tickle 'em real firmly. And get back to lovin' the journey you kinda hate. We all collectively lost our minds and started one after another like it was karaoke. Basically, we were enjoying ourselves. The journey was also going smoothly. For whatever reason, everyone's spirits were as high as they could have been in a murderous jungle. But still, even amid all that bizarre cheerfulness, the presence trailing behind us hadn't vanished. That feeling that someone was following us, watching us, stalking our every move never went away even after we exited the shadowed region. So when we finally found a safe, open clearing to settle down, the first thing we did wasn't unpack. It was start a hunt. After all, we couldn't wait around to just slip up, giving whatever thing was on our trail a chance to sweep in and make an easy meal out of us. And we didn't. With Kong and Lily's help, we started tracking our stalker. Soon, we surrounded an underbrush where we suspected it was hiding. Then we closed in on it. Our weapons were raised, and it seemed like we were ready for everything, until we found a bird. Vince scowled. A very, very adorable bird. The thing was round, fluffy, bright-eyed. It was maybe the size of a mango, with a faintly glowing tuft on its head. It had tiny wings and even tinier feet, dark blue fur, and a squeaky chirp that sounded like it was permanently apologizing for troubling us. Quote. This thing was following us. I dismissed my axe, utterly baffled. Oh my gods, Lily gasped. It's so cute. It is a monster, I said firmly. It's so cute, she repeated, firmer, glaring at me. I rolled my eyes and turned to Juliana for support. She didn't say anything for a second. I frowned, because I definitely expected her to be the first one to suggest murder. But instead, she just walked forward, bent down, scooped the little creature up, and held it to her cheek like she had found the meaning of life. The bird chirped again, gently tapping her face with its tiny beak. Juliana inhaled deeply. And then, with the most treacherous smile I had ever seen, she said, let's keep it. Everyone except Alexia and I shouted, yeah. I stared at them like they were madmen. They were talking about adopting a fucking spirit beast. Had they lost their minds? Michael had literal sparkles in his eyes. Kong looked like he was witnessing his firstborn child. And Ray was already braiding a crown of vines for that thing. I exchanged a look with Alexia. She whispered, they've gone insane. I nodded slowly. Possible. Beasts that affect the mind aren't unheard of. Yeah, Alexia affirmed. It has a strange aura. Maybe it's affecting us. I didn't waste any more time. Give me the bird, I told Juliana. No, she replied instantly. My eyebrow twitched. Give me the bird. No, Juliana narrowed her eyes, turning away like I was demanding her life. So I snatched it. She froze, and the others gasped like I had kicked a puppy across a field. I shoved the fluffy demon spawn toward Michael. Kill it fast. Michael gulped and looked at the bird. The bird tilted its small head and chirped innocently. Michael's expression crumpled. I can't. The fuck you mean, you can't? It's a monster, you idiot. I snapped. So you kill it. Michael snapped back. I groaned. Fine, you pussy, but this is why you were my least favorite character in the game. Michael reeled back in confusion. What? I ignored him and lifted my hand, intending to take the bird's head off with a single chop. But then I hesitated for a heartbeat. The bird chirped again. I saw its eyes sparkling as it leaned forward and nuzzled my thumb. Damn it. My heart melted. No, my brain melted. My dignity melted. I stood frozen, staring at its adorably stupid face. Alexia let out a long, suffering sigh like she was the only mature adult in a group of useless kids. Give it to me. Before I could stop her, she snatched the bird, wrapped her fingers around its tiny neck, and squeezed. The bird gave a last squeak as everyone gasped again. And just like that, our unusually cheerful demeanor evaporated in a second. In its place, a crushing sense of terror abruptly dropped onto us like a boulder. My knees nearly buckled. Everyone else had a similar reaction. Vince whimpered, Ray's face turned ashen, Michael's eyes flew wide. What the hell? Lily breathed, folding over, hands on her knees. What is this? It felt as if a haze on our minds had been lifted, one we didn't even realize was there. Our thoughts were suddenly so much clearer, allowing us to immediately recognize that our unnaturally jolly behavior for the last couple of days wasn't normal. Especially in a place like this, when we were marching closer to the caldera at a time when we should be feeling constant fear. We were instead cheerful in a maddening, creepy, concerning sort of way. But the instant that bird died, everything returned to normal. This beast, Kong pointed at the dead bird at Alexia's feet, this thing. It was absorbing our negative emotions. We all stared at the corpse. It made a lot of sense as soon as Kong put it into words. There was no other explanation. This tiny bird had been feeding on all our fear and anger and stress and dread. It was why we had suddenly been so happy and bubbly all the time. It could have been useful, I murmured with a twinge of regret. As if on cue, the bird's supposedly dead body twitched. Alexia recoiled, startled. The fuck? It's alive. It twitched once more, its twisted head flicked back into place, and then... Pop! It stood up, looking perfectly healthy, its neck unbroken as if it hadn't just been strangled 15 seconds ago. Everyone looked bamboozled. The wave of fear pressing down on us instantly weakened again. Well, that confirmed it. Oh, fuck this thing. Ray shrieked and unleashed a blazing explosion on the bird before I could stop him. Flames engulfed the tiny creature's body, reducing it to ash. But when the fire cleared, the ashes piled up on their own and puffed like someone blew on them. And from inside that gray cloud, the same tiny, fluffy bird hopped out, shook itself off, and chirped. Completely, utterly, unharmed. For the next hour, we tried everything to kill the bird. And I mean everything. Ray threw it off a cliff. It returned. Kong buried it under a boulder. It climbed out. Vince tried to drown it in a puddle. It floated. Michael tried blasting it with a lightning-infused punch. It sneezed. I tried vaporizing it with a fire arrow. It rose from its ashes again. Alexia attempted to choke it again. It died in her grasp, resurrected, and started licking her finger. She almost screamed. I had never before seen Alexia lose her patience. Finally, Juliana scooped it up and held it to her chest protectively. Enough. Let's keep him. Him, I squeaked. It's a it, and it is a menace. He is cute, she said. I threw my hands up. It is cursed. He is my pet now. And I'm naming him Kevin, she added. The bird chirped, as if in agreement. I facepalmed. Aside from Juliana, none of us was in favor. But since we couldn't kill it, and it was going to follow us anyway, we gave up. And so, Kevin became our new pet. Kevin, the indestructible suffering eater. Kevin, who grew stronger the more misery he consumed. Kevin, who nullified fear, the only thing letting us move closer to the caldera without collapsing. Was he useful? Sure. Was he safe? Doubtful. Could we do anything about it? I wished. So we decided to go along with Juliana's suggestion and keep it. In Kevin's presence, we weren't allowed to feel fear or anxiety. So we didn't regret the decision. Not yet. Chapter 293. Dual Sword Art I. Another day went by with ease. No monster ambushed us, no ancient traps showed us our darkest nightmares, no one fell off a cliff. The journey to the caldera was going so smoothly that I was nearly getting bored. Soon we were going to reach its jagged foothills and start climbing toward the top. Nothing was amiss, which, normally, would have been a blessing. But since we didn't encounter any beasts, it also meant we had run out of things to kill. Which, in turn, meant we had also run out of things to eat. Yes, we still hadn't had a proper meal. All of us were awakened, so we could go on without food far longer than a normal human, especially Michael and I, since the two of us were at B rank. But the rest of our companions still needed to eat eventually. By the time we set up camp for the day, the entire group was starting to look like a slow, shuffling pack of starving zombies. Even the ever laid-back Alexia looked ready to tear bark off a tree and take her chances. And then there were Ray and Vince. One thing I had come to realize about that duo during this journey was that they could not handle an empty stomach with dignity. Right now, they were off at the edge of the camp, staring at Kevin. Kevin, the unkillable bird that we had adopted yesterday. It's so small, Vince whispered, crouched on all fours like an extremely malnourished hyena stalking a piece of meat. His hollow eyes were full of hunger and resolve. Ray shook his head solemnly. It's perfect, more than enough to fill me. Kevin blinked in the opposite direction. Then he opened his beak, let out a very disturbing sound like someone gurgling marbles, shed every single feather on his body, inflated like a balloon, shrank back down, and wrapped itself in freshly regrown feathers. Only now, it was slightly bigger, around the size of a chicken. Ray inhaled sharply. We ignore that. Vince nodded immediately. Agreed. A plan, if one could even call it that, was discussed between them. Ray found a flat, smooth rock that looked ideal for both bludgeoning and tenderizing. Vince stole a handful of salt from Alexia's dimensional storage chest. Because they obviously needed seasoning. Who in their right mind would eat meat without seasoning? That would be barbaric. Then Vince knitted a net from braided vines and held it up with pride. Let's go. He'll never see it coming. The universe must have heard him, because that was exactly the moment Juliana walked past them, carrying a heap of firewood. She gave them a long, heavy, deadpan stare. She looked like she wanted to say many things, none of them flattering. At last, she settled on, you both are going to regret whatever you're doing. Ray flashed her a smug grin. Sweet of you to care, Julia. No, Juliana replied, smiling with such blatant delight that she didn't even try to hide. I actually want to see you suffer. With that ominous remark, she walked away. They hesitated for a brief second but proceeded anyway, as hunger won over reasoning. And, believe it or not, they succeeded. As astonishing as it may sound, the idiots succeeded. They hunted that little fluffy bird. They killed him. Then they cooked him before he could regenerate. Finally, they ate him. They ate without sharing with any of us. Not that we would have agreed to eat a nigh immortal monster anyway. But they did. They ate every last charred, over-seasoned, questionably edible piece of Kevin until only his bones remained, stacked out in a neat little pile. For a few blissful seconds, everything was perfect. Their hunger was satiated. Then Ray burped and made a tiny, strangled noise. And Vince followed. What came next was something that still haunts them to this day, and amuses us. It was nothing serious. Just hours upon hours of sharp stomachaches and wrenching cramps that reduced both of them to a writhing mess. They screamed and cried and cursed, rolling on the ground and swearing oaths to never touch meat again in life. Eventually, their agony subsided. But before they could even breathe a sigh of relief for surviving the past 2 hours, they started violently throwing up, emptying the entire contents of their stomachs onto the forest floor. They continued to throw up until there was nothing left in them, until all they could do was retch uncontrollably. And then, as they lay there defeated and half dead, something rattled nearby. The bones. Kevin's bones. His bones trembled and shivered and rearranged themselves on their own, a soft glow pulsing through them before new flesh sprouted. Kevin's whole body regenerated in the blink of an eye, his feathers bursting out again in a puff, and by the end of it, he was simply standing there. He looked larger, healthier, unscathed, and unapologetically smug, if monsters could even be smug. Ray stared at him with lifeless eyes. Vince whispered weakly, "That fluffy motherfuck, quah!" And he started throwing up again. Everyone had a different way to distract themselves from the gnawing hunger. Lily and Michael were talking about boring couple stuff. Since they didn't get to go on too many dates before joining the academy, they were making up for it here. In the middle of a nightmarish jungle, while on our way to an eldritch creature. Truly romantic. Still, their quiet, awkward smiles were cringing me out. Lily was asking Michael questions and telling him things, and he was sincerely listening. She had that habit. She overshared a lot of things with those she felt comfortable talking to. Personally, I could never listen to her talk so much about herself. And it wasn't just her. It was everyone. If we were talking, it needed to be about me. Oh, I suddenly started to realize I was a really bad boyfriend. Anyway, since they were talking, and it would have been weird for me to interrupt their intimate space, I left them alone. Vince and Ray were still half dead from their stomach infection, so they were resting by the campfire. Kong had climbed up a tall tree and was now lying idly atop a branch. That guy never stopped being edgy. So I walked around the campsite a little more and found Alexia meditating. For the last few days, she had been pestering me to train with her. Yes, by the way, these guys trained even here. Whenever we'd get a couple of slow days, all of them would start training or testing their card combos. I never understood the need for it. I mean, we were fighting for our lives almost every other day in this place. Why did they all feel the need to train more on top of that? It felt like signing up for extra homework while the exam was already punching you in the face. But Alexia didn't want my excuses. She wanted to spar with me. And I wanted to not get beaten up by her. Don't get me wrong, in a no-holds-barred match, I was confident I could defeat her. Not only did I have a few strategies to counter her already prepared in my mind, but she was also a rank below me right now. But in a controlled combat situation, with rules and restrictions, where I couldn't use my cards and weapons, I had no doubt that she would wipe the floor with me. My ego wouldn't be able to handle that humiliation. What if I start crying publicly? Hey, don't judge me. At my core, I was still an arrogant young master who hated losing to the main characters, okay. I didn't avoid the route where I'd become a third-rate villain and get beaten up by Michael just to get beaten up by Alexia after coming this far. So, seeing that she was lost in meditation, sitting on a flat piece of rock with a serene expression, I slowly began to retreat. If she heard me, she'd grab me and won't let go. I hear you, Samael. Her voice, her pure, angelic, adorably high-pitched voice that, to me, sounded like the whisper of death itself, cut through the silence. And I got chills. I didn't wait another second, and made a run for the woods like my life was on the line. Because it was. Wow, wait, she shouted, completely taken aback. Get back here, you bitch. I heard Theospanes were brave. I didn't give in to provocations. I just ran. Branches snapped under my feet as I dashed into the darkness, sprinting like a man who had absolutely no shame left to lose. Behind me, Alexia's footsteps were as soft, yet somehow infinitely more terrifying. I swear to the monarchs, I gasped, jumping over a tall fern. This woman is going to kill me in the name of friendship. You can't run forever, she screamed from uncomfortably close behind. I looked back, and what I saw chilled me to my core. That girl, she wasn't even running, she was speed walking, like those serial killers from old movies. You're not even trying, I yelled. I don't need to, she replied, voice flat and calm and full of impending doom. You breathe loud. Wow, that hurt. Chapter 294. Dual Sword Art 2. Somehow, someway, I managed to escape that little, blind, short, battle maniac of a demoness alive. It wasn't easy. At some point during the chase, she got serious and deployed a bunch of enhancement cards to buff her speed. So I also had to use my own innate power and ride away on a tidal wave of earth as if I were surfing on solid ground. Like I said, she didn't make it easy. But in the end, I did get away, shouting at her over my shoulder, "You'll never catch me alive." Anyway, after slipping her grasp, I decided to wait a bit before going back to camp. So I took a slow walk through the woods, letting my pulse settle and sorting my thoughts on some matters that had been plaguing my mind for a while. As I strolled, I noticed that there really were no monsters in sight here. Not a single monster, not even those overgrown insects. Nothing dangerous at all. Well, if you don't count Kevin. The jungle felt strange without a constant sense of danger breathing down my neck. It felt serene, almost peaceful. It felt normal, like I was back on Earth. Well, that is if forests on Earth had giant black trees, cracked sky, and a bleeding red moon. Other than that, though, yeah, it was perfectly normal. I walked beneath twisted boughs and thick roots coiling in and out of the soil like serpents. The ground was soft with a sludge of decaying leaves, and the air tasted of iron and damp stone. As crazy as it may sound, the walk was refreshing. Yeah, I know, refreshing isn't a word that most people would use to describe a death zone. But it was. For a moment, I let myself drift, just listening to my surroundings with a calm mind. Swish, swee, swishh. And that was when I heard a series of sharp sounds, like someone slicing the air with edged steel. I froze for a second or two, which was almost enough time for me to summon my axe as another swish came from deeper in the trees. It sounded nothing like a monster's cry or a creature's movement. If anything, it sounded like a rhythm, a pattern. I narrowed my eyes and approached quietly. As I did, the forest opened into a small hill. And there, on its top, I saw my shadow. Juliana was moving in the dark with such finesse and elegance that it seemed like she was dancing. She looked as graceful as a flower petal does while floating in a breeze, or a drop of rain as it falls down in a storm. It took me a moment to notice that she was practicing a set of swings while wielding two swords at once, a katana in her right hand that sang through the air, and a wakizashi in her left that answered it half a heartbeat later. Her steps were light and soundless, her motions flowy but sharp enough to carve wind. Each arc of her blade was clean and deliberate, and as beautiful as it was frighteningly swift. Her neck-length white hair flicked with every time she made a turn. And the crimson light of the bleeding moon reflected across both her blades, catching the edges and making them flare like twin ribbons of pale fire. It was really a sight to behold. Juliana's expression was blank. She always looked empty when she was focused, but I could feel a quiet rage in the way she moved. It appeared to me as if she was restraining herself. Wait, no, it wasn't restraint. It was struggle. She was struggling to go all out. As if the blades weren't moving in her hands like she wanted them to. Like they were refusing to. Which felt weird to me. Because what she was doing already looked perfect in my eyes. I'm not exaggerating. I wish I could describe it better in words, but I really can't. Because there are things in the world that you just can't capture in words, only in memory. That was one of those things. The first time I saw her practicing that swordplay was the first time I realized that Juliana Voxblade wasn't simply born with talent. She was also born in defiance of it. But unbeknownst to my thoughts, Juliana continued practicing. She dashed forward, cut, twisted, cut again. Her two blades moved in one breath like they were an extension of her arms. I leaned against a tree, letting the tension bleed out of my grip. My axe felt clumsy compared to the art she was putting on show. Eventually, she stopped mid-swing, letting her blades rest at her sides. Her white hair shone in the moonlight and fell in waves over the one side of her sweat-slicked face. And while she didn't turn to face me, she spoke. "You know, you breathe too loud." I blinked, yanked out of my trance by her voice and suddenly very offended. "Excuse me, I don't." She finally turned and looked down at me from atop the small rise. Right now, she was dressed only in a sleeveless tank top and low-waisted leather pants, leaving her toned abs visibly flexing every time she moved. "Yes, you do," she nodded. "And you also look like someone who ran from Alexia again." I frowned. That's oddly specific. Is it oddly correct? She curved her lips up in that little smirk that never failed to annoy me. I rolled my eyes and immediately changed the topic because there was no use denying anymore. It was a beautiful sword art you were practicing. Was it the Blossoming Horizons? Because it looked different from Two Heavens as One. Two Heavens as One was the Blades family's signature sword art, popularized by the last sword saint of the West, Draven Voxblade, Juliana's paternal grandfather. It was a very versatile sword art that could be used as both offensive and defensive technique depending on the enemy's fighting style. As such, it was ridiculously unpredictable, making it a headache to face. And while Juliana's father died before passing the technique on to her, she still taught it to herself on her own from her memories of him. But what Juliana was practicing wasn't that. It was smooth, not tyrannical. It was calming, not wild. It was flowy, not erratic. She raised an eyebrow. You know about Blossoming Horizons? Now Blossoming Horizons was one of House Valkyrie's many sword arts. And I knew very little about them. Somewhat. Valkyries aren't exactly secretive about their family's martial techniques, I shrugged, then paused. Your mother was a Valkyrie, wasn't she? Juliana waited for a split second longer than needed before sighing softly. Technically, she was from the Branch family, but yes. Then she looked at her swords with a heavy gaze. But what I was practicing wasn't Blossoming Horizons. It was a sword art my mother developed herself. It's called the Fall Before Spring. Juliana dismissed her swords and started walking downhill toward me. She taught it to me a few days before she was killed. The sword art is meant to represent the last petal of spring. The moment when the bloom has ended, when the flowers are wilting, and winter has arrived. Her boots brushed through the tall grass as she came to stand before me. But the meaning isn't mourning. It's acceptance. Spring ends, but it always returns. No matter how long the winter is. I listened silently, because Juliana rarely spoke about her mother. My guess was, staying near Kevin for so long had cracked her icy exterior a little. After all, in Kevin's presence, you couldn't feel anger, fear, hate, anxiety, depression, or any negative emotion. Or, at least, those emotions are significantly weakened. Meaning, Juliana probably didn't even realize she was opening up more than usual these days. Or maybe she did, and this was again a part of her some long-term convoluted master plan. Hard to tell, really. To master the verses, she continued, you have to understand their essence. You have to understand life is bittersweet. Sorrow is what makes us want to cherish happiness. Cold is what drives us to seek warmth. You have to find comfort in the ache, and let go of the pain. You have to believe spring will come, no matter how long the winter is. The bleeding moon glowed faintly on the side of her face. And when she looked at me, I saw her eyes were calm and empty, and yet strangely vulnerable. Fall before spring requires a heart that can bend without breaking, she spoke softly. And I can't do that. I understand the technique. I understand the rhythm. I understand exactly how I need to move. But I can't seamlessly transition from the second form to the third. No matter how hard I try to push through, the winter doesn't end. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Because what are you even supposed to say after a seemingly perfect, albeit a little crazy girl who could gut monsters and men alike without changing her expression? Who could manipulate a room full of schemers with a single sentence? Who could both terrify and charm people simultaneously? What are you even supposed to say when a girl like that confesses she couldn't do something? That spring wouldn't come for her. I exhaled slowly. You know, for someone who insists she has no emotions, you sure talk very poetically sometimes. She narrowed her eyes like saying seriously. I lack empathy, not intelligence. I snorted. Juliana let out an almost laugh too. She had a beautiful smile when she wasn't trying to be irritating. It was a shame she didn't smile more often. I frowned. Wait, what the hell am I thinking? Maybe Kevin was affecting my emotions as well. Yeah, that must be it. From here on out, I decided to blame everything wrong in my life on Kevin. Chapter 295, Dual Sword Art 3. I watched Juliana cool herself off in the soft breeze, stretching her arms before tugging her tank top straight. Then she bent, picked up her leather jacket from where she'd tossed it earlier, and slung it over her shoulder while muttering something about needing a proper bath. She looked both refreshed and tired from the practice. And her face had already fallen back into its usual calm, polished, unbothered, and unreadable expression. While mumbling about getting back to the camp together, she stepped me. Tried to step past me. Because I moved a foot in front of her and said something so unironically, stupidly unbelievable that it surprised even me, teach me. The beat of silence that followed was so loud it felt like the trees flinched. Juliana stopped mid-step. Slowly, excruciatingly slowly, she turned her head toward me. Her face carried the exact expression of someone who had just been ambushed by a particularly stupid request. Teach you, she repeated. I nodded like it was the most normal thing I could have asked for. Yes, teach you, what? ? She blinked once. And please don't say swordsmanship. Swordsmanship, I immediately followed with the most innocent smile I could put on. Another silence followed. This one was somehow even longer. Juliana stared at me like she was waiting for the punchline. Unfortunately for my poor shadow, I wasn't making a joke. I was being unapologetically serious. So I stared back at her like I genuinely believed I was being reasonable. Both of us held our stances like two idiots locked in a contest of mutual delusion. Finally, she breathed out through her nose. Young master. I batted my lashes at her. Julie, you can barely hold your axe without threatening your own allies. What? That's just not true. You almost killed Vince when we were in the shadowed region. Okay, Vince stands in stupid places. He was standing right behind you. Again, a stupid place to stand while I'm just out of a battle and my nerves are on edge. Besides, don't act like you don't want Vince dead so you can loot his supplies either. Yes, but that's not the point. She shut her eyes for a moment, clearly praying for patience she absolutely did not have. When she opened them again, her stare was flat enough to iron fabric. Okay, why, she said slowly, should I teach you? What makes you think you can learn anything from me? Because I want to, I said simply, once again putting on my most innocent smile. Her eyebrows twitched upward. It was a small, quick change in expression. But for Juliana, it was the equivalent of a full-blown gasp. You want to? She echoed. That's your reasoning. I scowled. Hey, do you have any idea how rare it is for me to want things that aren't either liquor, money, or women? That alone should tell you how serious I am. Juliana almost facepalmed. Again, that's not the point. That's exactly the point. I sighed and stepped a little closer before lowering my voice. Look, you're the only one I know who possesses not just one but 3 dual-wielding sword techniques. So you're the only one who can teach me. I had been meaning to ask you this for a long time, but I never got around. She didn't say anything for a few heartbeats, but this time the silence between us felt softer. Then she shook her head. You know what I'm trying to say. What makes you think you can learn anything from me, when I can't trust you to never use what I teach you against me someday? When I can't trust you to never stand against me? Her words were neither sharp nor angry. If anything, they were just honest and quiet. They were calm and cruel and painfully reasonable. I frowned at her, feigning utter confusion. Why would I ever stand against you? Give me one reason I'll ever be your enemy. She gave me a look. A very specific look. The look that said she wanted to summarize several months' worth of my questionable decisions, impulsive choices, mad strategies, erratic mood swings, and everything else I do. Do you want the list alphabetically? She said evenly, or chronologically? Okay, rude. I threw my hands up in mock surrender. But we've already been over this. The very reason I didn't, kill you when I killed Rexard was because I wanted you on my side. We also have taken an oath to not harm one another. And I have promised to help you take your revenge. Juliana exhaled. Sure, but then what? That oath is not eternal. And what's your goal once I've accomplished mine? You say you want to dethrone some monarchs, but why? You talked about, what was it? The Syndicate. Are you against them? Why? When I asked you all this, you said your reasons don't concern me. But the problem is, young master, it does. I don't know your true alliances. But I do know one thing, it's that if you ever need to raise your sword against me, you'd do it. I know you'd do it without hesitation. Tell me if I'm wrong. I was quiet for a brief moment. Truth be told, I wasn't even offended. Or defensive. I was just a little surprised that Juliana had ditched her mask and decided to talk to me so openly without beating around the bush like she usually does. So I shrugged once again. Okay, yeah, that's fair. She frowned mid-blink, as if she hadn't expected me to agree. Quote. Fair, yes. I lifted a shoulder. You're not wrong. Her expression flattened. Why, you're agreeing with me? I am. I chuckled at her disbelief. I mean, come on, Julie. You're smart. You know me. If the universe ever decides to throw us on opposite sides, we'd both adapt. You'd stab me in the face. I'd stab you in the ribs. If we deny it, we'd be fooling no one. So, she muttered. So, I'm not promising eternal loyalty, I said softly. But I can promise you this. As long as we're on the same side, I'll never betray you. Juliana kept holding my gaze, then smirked. Very sweet, almost romantic, young master. But there's nothing you can do or say to convince me. And I'll also promise you 50 essence stones a day for every day you teach me dual wielding, I added immediately. Consider me convinced. She clapped her hands excitedly like a greedy car salesman. We can start right now, if you want. What a fucking gold digger. Chapter 296. Family above all. After a little contemplation, Juliana settled on teaching me the blossoming horizons. According to her, I was nowhere near skilled enough to handle one sword properly, let alone two at once, to be taught two heavens as one. That hurt my ego. But then, with a completely straight face, she added that I was also not mentally mature enough to grasp the deep philosophy behind the fall before spring. That hurt even more. The fuck do you mean I'm not mature? I immediately started throwing a tantrum. I'm very mature. Do you know how many DMs I got from older girls back at the academy? Would they be fawning over me if I wasn't mature? Juliana raised a single, delicate, judgmental brow, then said gently, case in point. I nearly lost it and got into a boxing stance. Come here, you damn wench. Get these hands. Juliana massaged her temple. Young master, the fall before spring requires emotional grounding, serenity, discipline, and clarity of spirit. You possess. She made a loose, helpless gesture in my general direction, the opposite of all that. I folded my arms. I can be serene. I'm learning meditation from Alexia these days. Yeah, I saw you learning. We all saw. You were sleeping, she said, deadpan. I hesitated. Okay, then, I can be disciplined. You missed almost all your classes at the academy, she added in the same tone. I started sweating. See, can I be clear of spirit, then? At this point, Juliana didn't even dignify me with a spoken reply. She just kept staring long. Enough for the breeze to pity me. Blossoming horizons, she repeated finally. That is the only one I'll teach you. I exhaled loudly. Fine, whatever. Just tell me what it is. Juliana shifted, summoning her swords back into her hands. Her tone turned serious as she began explaining. Blossoming Horizons is a footwork-heavy sword art. It focuses on quick movement, snappy flow, and a lot of feint attacks to create openings. You don't overpower or overwhelm your enemy with strength or unpredictability. You outmaneuver them. At higher levels, when you can channel your essence outside your body, you can extend your strikes beyond your blade's natural reach. You can also attack from many different directions at once. It's said that at its peak, the practitioner of this technique can create enough ethereal swords with their essence to cover the entire horizon. I nodded along. But at our level, the key, she added, eyes narrowing, is anticipation. Reading your opponent and sensing their moves before they commit. Thankfully, you have a ridiculously high battle IQ combined with equally good instincts, so learning this technique shouldn't prove very difficult for you. I smirked and let out a smug, hey. Juliana didn't hear, or maybe she did and just pretended not to. Now, foot positioning. She crouched slightly and angled her swords outward. Keep your steps light, but don't ever move first. This is a defensive technique, so you need your opponent to come at you first. I know not charging senselessly headfirst into danger is against your style, but please try. I rolled my eyes. Even the slightest chance to poke me and this girl will immediately take it. Anyway, I transmuted 2 rock swords from the ground and started shadowing my shadow. And like that, Juliana Vox Blade started teaching me my first proper dual sword art. 3 days passed. Our march toward the caldera continued, though I was now lugging around a little extra burden, Juliana's constant, unrelenting criticism of my technique. Your stance is terrible, she barked for the 50th time. I've seen puppies swing sticks more gracefully than that. I am trying, I snapped, slashing with the twin rock swords in quick succession. Trying isn't enough. You're moving like a girl, she added with an infuriating sneer. No offense to girls, but you're slow, sloppy, and indecisive. Lily, who was preparing soup by boiling tree bark in water because we still hadn't come across anything to eat, made a face at that. How is that not an offense? I stopped and looked at her. You know what, Julie? You're a bad teacher. She was sitting directly on top of a small mound of glimmering essence stones like a crow hoarding its treasure. Her chin rested on one hand while the other lazily patted Kevin as he sprawled beside her. And speaking of Kevin, that fucker had grown even more. Now he was the size of a fully grown dog. At this point, it felt like he was growing every time I looked away from him. Juliana sighed like the weight of the world rested entirely on my incompetence. Could be, or it could be that you're just a bad student. Now stop complaining and start practicing again. Step, feint, pivot, anticipate. Imagine yourself moving in front of you. If you can deceive yourself, you can deceive the enemy. The fuck does that even mean? I exclaimed, but immediately got back to swinging. Why are you talking like Sun Tzu? Michael, sitting by the campfire and shamelessly enjoying the sight of my suffering far more than he should, frowned. Who's Sun Tzu? Vince groaned from across the clearing, sitting up slowly and clutching his stomach. Yeah, he and Ray still hadn't fully recovered from eating Kevin. He was a Chinese philosopher and strategist. Now I don't know what Chinese is. I stopped again, only for a split second, to stare at him in confusion. Then I remembered. That's right. It had been more than 500 years since the world and its geography completely changed. Most kids today wouldn't know about old world countries. Still, it was strange to hear a Chinese descendant say he didn't know about China. Oh, yeah, Vince was half Asian, half white. Probably. I was mostly sure. I guess I shouldn't go around racial profiling my companions. So instead, I returned to practicing. By the time the day was over, my muscles were aching in places I couldn't even reach to touch, thanks to awkward footwork and relentless swinging. Okay, well, due to the near superhuman endurance granted by my B-rank physique, most of the pain wasn't even real pain. My muscle aches subsided within minutes. But the pain of being humiliated and constantly roasted by my own shadow was far too severe to recover from. I'm not even kidding. Juliana's insults were so sharp and blunt and increasingly creative that any lesser man would have been reduced to tears. Thankfully, I'm not a lesser man. So I didn't cry. And did you see how Samael started crying when Julia said that even wet noodles are tighter than his arms? I turned sharply toward the infuriating voice behind me. Shut up, Michael. I wasn't crying. Alexia, walking beside me, pointed at me mockingly. No, you did. You definitely did. And you know what, it serves you right. You ran away from sparring with me, but asked a pretty girl to train you the very next second. Slowly, her tone turned more accusing than teasing. The very next second, Sam. You didn't even hesitate. What is it, huh? Am I not pretty enough for you to train with me, or are you more into dominant girls? By the next second, her tone wasn't even accusatory anymore. It was downright injured. I thought you were my friend, Sam. Friend. I want to spar with my friend. I want to beat him black and blue. I want to use him like my punching bag. Is it too much to ask? What the, Alexia? I spluttered. First, yes, it is too much to ask. And second, I didn't ask Julie because she's prettier than you. Michael facepalmed. Wow, you idiot, Alexia gasped, clutching her chest with one hand like I'd stabbed her. Wait. I waved my hands quickly upon realizing what I'd said. No, I didn't mean that. You didn't mean what, Lord Theosbane? Alexia asked sweetly in the same way poison berries are sweet. I mean, I asked Julie because I wanted to learn dual wielding from her. I said, conveniently leaving out the fact that I was more scared of facing Alexia in close combat than I was reluctant to get roasted by Juliana. Michael sighed. You know, if you wanted to learn a sword art, you could have just asked me. I wouldn't even have charged you. Why didn't you ask me? Was I imagining things or did he sound hurt as well now? What was up with these two? We continued walking back to the camp with stacks of firewood in hand. Yes, the three of us had been out to find some firewood, and now we were returning. Actually, only Michael and I had the firewood duty. I don't know why Alexia tagged along with us. I specifically wanted a dual-wielding technique, I explained. I doubt you knew one. Michael frowned. Yeah, fair, but he didn't get to complete his sentence. Because in the very next instance, we heard a loud explosion coming from our campsite up ahead. Chapter 297, Family Above All 2. We didn't waste a single second. The moment that blast resounded through the forest, the three of us dropped the firewood and sprinted toward the campsite. At full speed, dry twigs snapped under our feet, bushes whipped at our faces, and the smell of scorched soil grew sharper the closer we got. Michael's sword was already in his hand. Alexia immediately deployed her origin card. And I was desperately praying it was just Ray trying to eat Kevin again and nothing serious. Soon, we broke past the tree line, and flinched at the sight that awaited us there. In front of us was our campsite, which now looked less like our campsite and more like a battlefield. Our companions were spread out in a wide formation, weapons drawn and stances tense, just like we'd been taught back at the academy. That meant whatever they were facing was something intelligent. Which, in turn, meant the situation was definitely serious, contrary to what I'd hoped. I looked around and spotted a ridiculously thick pillar of gray smoke spiraling upward from the center of the clearing, where an ashy crater had formed. Sparks fizzled around its edges, and Ray stood a couple of steps away from it. The grim look on his face suggested he was more than ready, almost itching, to unleash another devastating explosion at any given moment. We approached, our breaths quick. What happened? Michael called out, smoothly assuming a fighting stance. Kong, already in his half-transformation, responded without leaving his position on the flank. There was, I don't know, a ghost suddenly fell between us and the smoke shifted, billowed, and cleared right then, completely diverting our attention from whatever nonsense Kong was muttering. A silhouette emerged from the settling dust, stepping into our view. It was a woman. A strange woman of tall stature and dusky complexion, seemingly in her early 30s. Dressed in a long black coat embroidered with silver threads that tastefully hugged her statuesque figure, she looked tantalizingly beautiful. Her blonde hair had an almost metallic sheen, falling in smooth waves down her back, and her eyes shone like two molten orbs of gold. But none of that captured our attention as much as her presence did. You see, her very existence felt unreal, almost ethereal, even as she stood right in front of our eyes. Why, oh, nothing special, it's just that her entire body was slightly see-through. Yeah, she was translucent, like a ghost. She raised one hand authoritatively while keeping her expression graceful. It was a gesture that demanded we cease our pitiful struggle while she still had the patience to overlook our impudence. As I was saying, she spoke calmly, as though continuing a conversation interrupted by the explosion earlier. Everyone needs to cool down and listen to me. Ray instantly pointed a palm at her. The air itself before him started to vibrate and heat up as a second explosion began condensing. Ray, wait, Juliana shouted, suddenly realizing something. Unluckily, she was too far away to stop him in time. Luckily, the detonation never happened. Because I was close enough. I grabbed Ray by the collar and yanked him back hard. His explosion fizzled out with a pathetic spark. Whoa, he spun toward me. Sam, she shook off my attack like it was nothing. And she looks like a specter. I'm responding normally here. I shushed him before he could ramble any further, for I was busy staring at the woman in shock. It didn't take much time for me to recognize her. And the moment I did, my heart sank straight to my feet. And Morgan. The woman's head turned sharply in my direction, her golden hair swaying like liquid sunlight. When her gaze found mine, her eyes widened, and her stern composure melted into pure relief. Sam, she breathed. Her familiar voice was soft as it was. Real enough to reassure me this wasn't a dream. She stepped toward me, ignoring every armed cadet in the clearing. Ignoring Ray's slack jaw, ignoring the drawn weapons and the taut, confused tension in the air. She looked at me the way someone looks when they finally find something precious they thought they'd lost. Oh, thank the stars, she said, trembling with warmth I hadn't seen from her in years. You're safe. You're really safe. She stepped closer, reaching out to caress my face. Are you hurt anywhere? You've been missing since what happened at the night sanctuary. We didn't even think. Her words faded into background noise as I kept staring at her. This woman was Morgan Kaiser Theosbane, my father's sister. My aunt. Wait, no, aunt. Did you just call her your aunt? Ray's shrill squeal cut through the clearing and snapped me out of my daze. As I saw my aunt's hand reaching for my face, I instinctively recoiled, taking a quick step back and pulling away before her spectral fingers could so much as touch me. Aunt Morgan froze. For a moment, the warmth on her face cracked, and she looked hurt. Her reaction wasn't anything dramatic. Most people would have missed it. But I didn't. And what followed after that was, understandably, silence. An awkward, suffocating, intense silence where no one spoke or moved. A silence in which even this usually murderous forest seemed unsure of how to react to whatever this reunion was supposed to be. No one knew what to make of it. Thankfully, after what felt like an eternity, Michael leaned slightly toward Alexia and whispered far too loudly to be considered a whisper. I always suspected he was related to unholy things like ghosts and demons. Smack. Lily gently slapped the back of his head. That's not a ghost, she hissed. That's the Queen of Smiles herself. Empress of the Damned, Morgan the Soulmancer. Then she stepped forward and bowed respectfully toward my aunt. We apologize, Lady Morgan. We didn't recognize you. Ray stiffened. Oh, yeah, sorry. He blurted out before, for reasons known only to his panic-riddled mind, activating his drone and starting a recording. He thought he was being discreet. He wasn't. I glanced at him. Yeah, that was definitely in case she killed him. At least there'd be evidence. Morgan turned her gaze toward them and inhaled slowly. When she exhaled, the crack in her expression was replaced by the same composed calm she'd worn when she first emerged from the smoke. Sure, she said evenly. Then her eyes moved back to me. When she spoke again, her tone was polite, but left absolutely no room for refusal. Now, if you all don't mind, I'd like a moment alone with my nephew. Chapter 298. Family above all. 3. No one argued when my aunt asked everyone to clear the area. Turns out, when an SS-ranked ghostly woman with a reputation for turning people into empty husks asks you to do something, even a group as uncooperative as my companions starts cooperating. They lowered their weapons, relaxed their stances, and immediately backed away with the kind of exaggerated casualness that very clearly said they wanted no part in this family talk at all. No one even met our eyes. Except Michael. Only he gave me a quick look that could have been interpreted as either, shout if you need us, or, if anything happens to you, I'll steal your stuff. I decided he meant the former. Hopefully. Finally, everyone cleared the area. I breathed slowly, and only then realized how rigid my shoulders were as I let them drop. Aunt Morgan was the first to move. This time, when she reached out to caress my face, I couldn't pull away. Or perhaps I didn't want to. Her touch felt like warm sunlight on my skin, definitely there, but so soft that it could have easily been chalked up to my imagination. Sam, she said, and when she spoke my name, her voice was heavy with worry and concern. You were unaccounted for after what happened in the night sanctuary. As soon as the news reached us, I astral projected and came searching for you in the Noctvale wilds. She exhaled shakily, her fingers lingering against my cheek as if she needed to reassure herself that she hadn't arrived too late. I thought I wouldn't find you in time because of the time dilation. I didn't even know if you were still alive. And there are beasts here that can harm formless beings, so I had to maneuver around them. I also had to heavily suppress my soul because, her lips pressed into a thin line. She clearly wanted to say because of the reflection beast, but then probably remembered I wasn't supposed to know about it. Anyway, I can't even begin to tell you how relieved I am to see you unharmed. Right then, her gaze dropped to the 3 deep, claw-shaped gashes hacked into my chest. Although covered by my shirt, she still seemed to be able to see them somehow. Her hand fell from my face as she winced. Well, unharmed is a relative term. At least you're alive. Then she blinked and glanced down at herself, followed by a hesitant shrug. Well, alive is also a relative term. Oh my God, I groaned. Stop talking, Aunt Em. Stop talking. To the world, Morgan Kaiser Theosbane was this dangerously fierce, soul-rending queen of the damned, an SS-ranked horror story that parents told reckless kids to scare them into obedience. I am 100% serious about this, by the way. The whole world saw her as the very embodiment of fear. And honestly, why wouldn't they? The legends surrounding her were riddled with grim forewarnings. Stories about how once she marked you as her prey, you could run to the ends of the world and beg whatever god you prayed to for protection, but at last, you would end up belonging to her. You'd end up a mere puppet in her hands. An obedient slave, answering her every whim. Because once she marked you, she'd tear your soul right out of you, leaving nothing but an empty vessel behind. Your body would still move, breathe, and speak, sure. But every spark of your will, every shred of your personality, would be hers to mold and hers to command. That was how everyone else saw her. Everyone who was not me. Because to me, she wasn't any of that. To me, she was just an aggressively wholesome woman with nerdy interests, an undying love for anything sweet, and an ADHD condition so pronounced that she never stopped babbling once she went off topic, traits I probably inherited from her. Oh, she was also into girls. And considering how voluptuous some of her past girlfriends were, maybe taste in partners was another thing I got from her. Anyway, growing up, she'd been the coolest aunt imaginable to me. It wouldn't be a lie to say she was, by far, my favorite person. Well, until she wasn't, because favorite is also a relative term. So yeah, here she was now, kneeling slightly to meet my gaze, her golden eyes as soft as they were hesitant. I sighed, rubbing my eyes with my thumb and forefinger. Does father know you're here? She nodded with a small smile. Of course, Sam, who do you think sent me? Wow, I hadn't expected that. It wasn't anything shocking. I'd suspected as much the moment I saw her here. But it still caught me off guard. Because part of me genuinely thought she'd acted on her own, without the Duke's approval. You see, entering the Noctvale wilds under any circumstance was strictly forbidden. After all, the reflection beast that was sealed here was a creature capable of learning and adapting to anything, perfectly copying anyone. That thing was barely contained as it was. So my father had outlawed entry into this region altogether, no matter your rank or clearance level, lest we risk unleashing an entity we could never control. But Aunt Morgan could use astral projection. She could also suppress her soul rank naturally, making her one of the very few people in the world who could enter the Noctvale Wilds without waking the reflection beast. Still, my father sent her to search for me. I didn't know how to feel about that. That tends to happen when a shitty parent suddenly does even the bare minimum. Aunt Morgan waved a hand, as if pushing aside all the questions she knew I was holding on to. We'll talk about everything later, Sam. There are a few urgent matters I need to return to. You'll see, she said, lifting a hand toward me in invitation. So hurry. Let's get out of here. We'll talk properly once we're home. I gawked at her, frozen more from utter confusion than anything else. What, Aunt? She cut me off, beating me to an explanation before I could even ask her to clarify. I'll take your soul with me. You'll have to leave this body behind. My jaw practically fell to the floor at that. But don't worry, she continued calmly, like she was discussing what to get for lunch, not reaping my fucking soul. We've already found you a new body with an almost perfect soul compatibility. It's waiting at the Golden Sanctuary. Once we get there, I'll place your soul into it and revive you. She hesitated for half a second, then she smiled brightly. I won't lie to you, dear. It'll be painful. Very, very painful. But you'll live. Chapter 299. Family above all, IV. She was done talking, but my jaw was still on the floor. I didn't know she could do that. That sounded like an insanely useful ability. Of course, there had to be some sort of limitations. But still, soul transfer sounded ridiculously overpowered. That's great, I exclaimed, clapping my hands together. Wait, let me get the others. No, I blinked and looked back at her. What? No, she repeated sternly. I can only take one soul in my currently suppressed state. Even that will put an enormous strain on me. Any more is impossible, and we don't have bodies prepared for anyone else. That's why I sent them away. So there's no need to inform them. Now, I want you to relax, if you don't mind, and give me verbal consent to own your soul. Don't worry, I'll return it as soon as we... No, I interrupted her this time. Now, as you might imagine, what followed was a very long stretch of baffled silence, baffled on her part, but very certain on mine. What, do you mean no, kid? She finally asked, her golden eyes narrowing with the faintest hint of incredulity. I mean, no, I repeated, holding up my hands defensively. On second thought, I don't want to leave this body behind. Look, this is my body. I like this one, I've had it since I was little. I like the arms, the chest, the face, and the you-know-what. I'm attached to all of it. Also, it's been a long time since we last talked, Aunt M. I don't know if we're at the stage where I can just hand my soul over to you. A soul sounds like a pretty important thing, you know. Aunt Morgan blinked slowly, clearly struggling to comprehend how idiotic I must have sounded to her. What the hell are you talking about? This is no time for jokes, Sam. I sighed gravely, realizing there was no use tiptoeing around the topic any longer. So I said it plainly. Look, I can't. Okay, I can't leave, not alone. Her frown wasn't even a frown anymore. It was a full-blown scowl. What? Oh, dear, don't tell me you're still infatuated with that shadow of yours. That Blade girl. Or wait, one of those cadets was your ex, right? Is this about her? Because if it is, you can get better women, Sam. Now come on, give me your consent. No. Another long pause spanned between us. I dragged both hands down my face and grunted, feeling gravel in my throat like I was about to admit something fatal. My friends, no, not friends. Those completely random people I was with. I pointed in the direction they'd gone. Then I pointed ahead, toward where we were going. I can't leave them behind. We're heading for the top of that caldera. And without me, our party won't survive crossing it. Some of them could very well die. Aunt Morgan stared at me like I'd grown 3 heads. One of her eyebrows was raised so high in judgment that it nearly vanished into her hairline. Have you lost your mind? She finally threw her hands wide. Is there a beast here somewhere messing with your head? You're willing to risk your life for a bunch of inconsequential nobodies. You're a Theosbane. Your life matters more than any of theirs. They're not nobodies, I snapped. And one of them is a Zinx. Alexia von Zinx. Duke Zinx's daughter. What if he finds out, and that shrewd man will definitely find out, that we left his daughter stranded in a death zone? His political ties with the Western monarch are growing. He could even use this as an excuse to. Fuck that, Aunt Morgan lost her patience and shrieked at last. Fuck the Zinxes. Fuck the monarchs, for all we care. Our priority is you, your life. The Western monarch, the Zinxes, we'll deal with all of them later if they blame us for saving our own instead of some strangers. ... Damn, I had never heard her curse before. And as touching as that was, which was not very, I still needed a way to turn her down. I hadn't lied before when I said our party wouldn't survive without me. The journey was almost over, but if I left them now, who knew which main character would end up dying, because someone definitely would. I couldn't risk that, but Aunt Morgan must have mistaken my resolve for hesitation, because she stepped closer and lowered her voice. Family above all, Sam. Family above. ... My blood boiled faster than my brain could catch up. Long before she even had the chance to finish that sentence, I set off. No, I stepped back, clenching fists so hard my knuckles turned white. Don't you dare throw that ludicrous motto in my face right now. It's hollow, it's fatuous, it's stupid. Her eyes widened slightly, but only slightly, as if she'd expected my temper to flare but not quite to this extent. I didn't care. Family above all. Family doesn't leave. But my own father all but abandoned me. Where was this sentiment when he stopped caring? When he destroyed my mental health because he couldn't handle a loss properly? Sam, she tried gently. He was grieving. You have no idea what he lost. Oh, the fucking audacity. I barked with no intention of backing down. I was grieving too. I lost my mother too. But why am I explaining all this like you don't know anything? You were right there. You saw everything, didn't you? You saw it all from the sidelines. You and Uncle Thorax. Neither of you ever interfered, even when I cried and begged for scraps of his attention. Even when the clan elders sidelined me from the succession race. Even when the entire family ridiculed me. She shook her head, eyes heavy with tears not yet spilled, face contorted like she wanted to say something but didn't know what. You think we didn't try? We did advocate for you, Sam. But you know Arthur, and your late awakening, your spiraling behavior. Excuses. I snarled. Just excuses to avoid beating around the fact that you blamed me too. Like father. Like everyone else. You all blamed me for Mom's death. Because if you hadn't, you would have reached out when I was breaking apart. I was just a child. Just a child, goddamn it. And because of you all, I started blaming myself. I rotted in my grief. I grew so bitter that I destroyed the one genuine connection I had through my childhood. You all were the cause of my so-called spiraling behavior, not me. You all drove me to the edge, and then blamed me for jumping. I didn't realize when my voice started cracking, or when the tears began to fall. Nor did I realize I still had so much venom buried in my heart. Aunt Morgan's hands trembled at her sides. Her golden eyes, same as mine if only a little softer, quivered for a second, and it looked like she might cry too. But she didn't. She composed herself, drawing a few deep breaths. Okay, that's fair. You're angry. No, Aunt Em, I'm well past angry. I nearly laughed at the word, regaining my own voice as a sharp edge of bitterness seeped through it. Now I'm just what this family has always been to me, indifferent. You, Uncle Thorax, the clan elders, father, my siblings, every last one of you could go to hell, and I wouldn't even blink. Her eyes flickered between guilt and hurt and something I couldn't place. She opened her mouth to speak, then closed it again, as if unsure how to respond. Then, after biting her lip hard, she exhaled and shook away from her posture entirely. I see, the warmth in her voice still hadn't left. That's understandable, but regardless of how you feel, Sam, I can't let you continue. You'll die on this path. You don't understand what's sealed at the top of that caldera. This time, I allowed myself to laugh. Believe me, I'll be fine. But if you want, you can rip my soul out without my consent, Aunt Em. See if I survive the torsion. If you're lucky, you might be able to salvage what's left and put it into a new body. If you're not, well, I don't think I need to explain the rest. Chapter 300. Family above all. V. Morgan stayed silent far longer than she had expected herself to, staring at her nephew with a storm of emotions churning in her head. The most prominent among them was fear. Not fear for herself, of course. Morgan Kaiser Theosbane hadn't known that luxury in years, but fear for him. Fear that he truly meant every word he'd said. Fear that he would rather risk annihilation than bend. Fear that, despite arriving here in time, she might not be able to protect him. There was guilt, too. Guilt for not intervening properly after Frida, her sister-in-law, sacrificed herself for Sam. Heavy and suffocating guilt, buried under duty and power and the comforting lie that someone else would step in, that Arthur would recover, that time would heal everything, that Sam would be resilient. And, at last, there was also anger. So much anger. At herself, at the clan elders, at her brothers, and at a family that prided itself on strength and wealth yet failed catastrophically at being exactly that, a family. But most of all, right now, she was angry at Sam himself. At the way the idiot was challenging her. At the thought that he was willing to risk his own precious life for a bunch of lowly peasants, insignificant nobles, and a pair of slaves. For the first time in years, she felt her temper flare. "What did you say? You heard me. Go ahead and try to forcefully take my soul if you want," he said, his tone every bit as provocative as he probably intended it to be. "I won't go with you of my own will, Queen of Smiles." Morgan stifled a grunt. If she were in her body, she would have slapped him hard right then and dragged him back exactly as he requested, forcefully. Because she could see it, the look in Sam's eyes wasn't teenage defiance or simple stubbornness or wounded pride. It was pure resolve. And any other time, under almost any other circumstance, she would have been proud to see him showcase that unwavering resolve. After all, it was one of the trademark traits of their family, murderous wrath, sky-high ego, and a will so unyielding it bordered on madness. Resolve like that was what had let the Theospanes carve their name into Western history with blood and ash. Resolve like that was also what got them killed. Resolve that was going to get him killed. Do you have any idea? Each word she spoke now as measured as her tone was low. "How stupid you sound, willing to gamble everything away for people who wouldn't even be remembered if they died here." Sam didn't even flinch. He met her gaze head-on, staring straight into the depths of her golden eyes. "I know," he said simply. "And I'm staying." That answer struck harder than any insult ever could have had. Morgan closed her eyes for a moment and began running some mental calculations, weighing them against his words. She could forcefully rip his soul from his body, just like he said. It would take time, but she could. The problem was, time was one thing she didn't have. Because to tear Sam's soul free, she would need to stop suppressing her own. And the moment she lifted the suppression wards placed on her, the reflection beast would awaken to her presence. "Can I risk it?" she thought. That was the question it all came down to. Could she risk the escape of one of the most powerful spirit beasts ever recorded, and the utter devastation it would wreak upon the world? The answer came to her far faster than she would have liked. No, not for anything, not even for him. If the reflection beast gained her powers, it would be able to break free of its seal. The loss of life that would follow would not only be immense, but also immeasurable. Morgan's jaw tightened as she opened her eyes again. Then she straightened her back, just as her ghostly form flickered, growing bright and dull. She had to immediately double down on suppressing her soul rank. The pressure in the air eased slightly. Her focus was slipping. The strain of using astral projection for so long was becoming too much. She needed to wrap this reunion up soon. "You really are your father's son," she murmured. Then, after a breath, amended, "Unfortunately." Sam didn't take the bait. That, more than anything else, unsettled her. When did he grow up so much? Morgan sighed and turned away, pacing a few steps as her fingers flexed at her side. The jungle around them remained deathly silent. "If I force you," she said at last, "I won't only risk our lives, but millions of others." "I can't do that." "So fine, you win. I won't force you." Her nephew almost smiled a triumphant smile, until she raised a finger. "But don't misunderstand me. This does not mean I approve of this idiotic stunt of yours. And it certainly does not mean I'm leaving you to your fate. Because you will die on this path." Sam frowned. Morgan continued, "So I'll improve your chances of survival, even if by only a little. Go, call your friends." But before he could move an inch, she spun and glared sharply at something on the ground a short distance away. Samael followed her gaze and saw a small drone, half hidden beneath wet leaves and creeping moss. Its camera lens was pointed directly at them. He didn't even need to guess. It was Ray, live streaming everything to his device. What was that idiot thinking, trying to spy on an SS rank hunter? Or no need, his aunt hissed. They can come out on their own, since they've obviously been listening. Within seconds, everyone was standing in a neat line before the Queen of Smiles like scolded children. And, unsurprisingly, every single one of them was terrified. Even Michael. Hell, even Kevin. Kevin, a fucking spirit beast that fed on negative emotions like fear, was also terrified. Samael didn't think he'd ever seen them this anxious, not even when they were fighting for their lives every single day in this hellish jungle. And speaking of Kevin, Morgan gave the large, fluffy bird a deeply quizzical look before turning to Samael in hopes of an explanation. But her nephew merely shrugged, as if that was somehow a perfectly reasonable answer. Only Alexia and Juliana were exceptions. The short redhead looked mildly annoyed, while the psychopath appeared, lost in her own thoughts, whatever they may have been. In stark contrast to the two girls, Ray was sweating bullets. The color had long since drained from his face, leaving him looking pale as a corpse. His drone had already been deactivated and now lay useless on the ground beside him. And he refused to look up, his eyes glued to the mud as if desperately praying for the earth to swallow him whole. The poor guy was already shaking like a leaf, but when Morgan stepped directly in front of him, he started whimpering. Actually whimpering. "What's your name, boy?" she asked. "Rah." Ray's voice cracked. He coughed, still trembling. "Ray Warner, ma'am." Morgan raised an eyebrow, as though something about that answer displeased her. "Real name." All went quiet for a moment, and everyone exchanged confused looks. As far as they knew, that was his real name. Right. Ray stopped trembling. When he looked up again, every trace of mock fear had vanished from his expression. "Ray Warner." He repeated it in a way that made it very clear he didn't appreciate her questioning it. Morgan paused, then narrowed her eyes. "All right, Ray Warner," she said, placing deliberate emphasis on the last part. "You're the farthest from ascending your soul rank out of everyone here. Let me help you with that." Ray blinked in confusion. "Wah." That was all he managed before Morgan's hand lashed forward and plunged into the boy's chest, sending a surge of essence deep into him. "Oh, and for future reference," she smiled down at him, "don't meet my gaze when you speak to me. I don't like that." Ray's eyes flew wide as it felt like he'd swallowed a smoldering coal. His mouth opened in a silent scream, but only wet, choking gasps escaped his throat. When she withdrew her hand, his knees gave out. He crumpled to the ground in a writhing heap, clutching at his chest in a vain attempt to try and claw the fire out of himself. Sweat poured down his face, mixing with mud as his body convulsed uncontrollably at her feet. Vince and Lily dropped to his side, screaming his name. Alexia, Kong, and Michael nearly drew their weapons. Fortunately, Juliana was there to stop them with a raised hand, a gesture that told them to hold off. Samael also wasn't worried. He knew Morgan had just forcibly pushed Ray's soul toward ascension. It could have been dangerous if Ray's rank had been higher, or if he hadn't already been close to achieving B rank. Then, and only then, the whiplash could have killed him. But in this case, it wasn't dangerous. Just excruciatingly painful. By the time Samael lifted his gaze, Morgan was standing in front of him. She cupped his cheeks in her hands and kissed his forehead tenderly. Samael didn't pull away. She lifted his chin to make him look at her directly. "I wish I could do more, but I don't have even a second to spare now." As if on cue, the ground under their feet started to shudder. The entire forest was rocked by a very, very violent earthquake. Samael knew what was happening. Morgan had lifted the suppressors on her soul, allowing the reflection beast to sense her presence. If she didn't leave quickly, the beast would awaken. So she did. "Please return to us alive, Sam. Please." With those final words, Morgan Kaiser Theosbane vanished before his eyes, dissolving into shimmering specks of silver light.